The colony. Searched for the lost little princess. She was sleeping on a human's shoulder. The weight on Kael's shoulder was so light he almost didn't notice it at first. The recycling plant's night shift had been brutal. 12 hours of sorting contaminated materials from the outer mining stations, and exhaustion made everything feel distant. But as he stepped out into the pre-dawn air of Nexus Colony's industrial district, something warm and small pressed against his neck, tiny fingers clutching the rough fabric of his work coveralls. His companion, a sleek ferret named Pip, chittered urgently from her perch on his other shoulder. The biomodified creature's fur stood on end, her usually bright amber eyes wide with concern as she stared at whatever had attached itself to Kael's back. Kael reached up slowly, his calloused hands encountering silk-soft hair and delicate limbs that couldn't belong to any human child. The moment his fingers made contact, a wave of pure exhaustion and terror washed through him. Not his own emotions, but something alien and desperate that made his chest tighten with inexplicable protective fury. "What the—" He turned his head carefully, and his breath caught. A child, no more than 8 years old by human standards, clung to his shoulder with desperate strength. But this was no human child. Luminescent silver markings traced intricate patterns across midnight blue skin, and gossamer thin wings lay crumpled and torn against her back. Her breathing was shallow and labored, each exhale releasing tiny sparkles of light that faded quickly in the artificial atmosphere. Pip leaped from Kael's shoulder to the child's arm, her tiny paws gentle as she nuzzled the alien girl's face. The ferret's whiskers twitched as she detected something Kael couldn't, some scent or energy signature that made her protective instincts flare. She positioned herself like a guardian, her small body forming a barrier between the child and the harsh colony air. "Hey," Kael whispered, his voice rougher than intended. "Hey, little one, where did you come from?" The child stirred slightly, her grip tightening on his coveralls. When her eyes fluttered open, they were the deep violet of Kepler system nebulae, shot through with threads of silver light. She looked at him with a confusion so profound it broke something inside his chest. The same look he'd seen in his own mirror after the factory accident that killed his younger brother 3 years ago. "Papa?" she whispered in accented standard, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Papa, the bad men came again. They hurt my wings." Kael's hands clenched into fists. The torn wing membranes weren't natural damage. They showed the precise cuts of human tools, deliberate mutilation meant to prevent flight. Someone had hurt this child, grounded her, left her vulnerable in a colony where non-humans faced constant suspicion. "I'm not your papa," he said gently, "but those bad men aren't going to hurt you anymore. I promise." The words surprised him. Kael hadn't made a promise to protect anyone since his brother died. Couldn't afford the risk of failing again. But looking at this fragile creature clinging to him with absolute trust, he felt something he thought was dead stirring back to life. Pip chittered softly, her whiskers tickling the child's cheek until a tiny smile ghosted across the alien girl's features. The ferret's presence seemed to calm her in ways Kael's words couldn't, and he made a mental note to double Pip's food rations tonight. "What's your name?" Kael asked, adjusting his position to support the child's weight more comfortably. "Zyphira," she said, then added with childish formality, "4th princess of the Aethon Royal House, keeper of the star songs, heir to the crystal throne of luminous prime." Despite everything, Kael almost smiled. Trust him to find the one alien kid on the colony who came with a royal pedigree and more titles than the colonial governor. But princess or not, she was just a scared child who needed help. "Well, Princess Zyphira," he said, "I'm Kael, and this is Pip. We're going to take you somewhere safe." "The colony searched for me," Zyphira said, her voice growing stronger. "I heard them calling, but I was so tired. My star song was broken." She touched her throat gingerly, and Kael saw more of those precise cuts. Deliberate damage to whatever organs allowed her species to communicate across distances. "They're still looking," Kael assured her. though he had no idea if that was true. But right now, you need rest and medical attention. He started walking toward his small apartment in the housing complex, Pip keeping watch from her position near Zyphira's head. The child's weight on his shoulder felt natural, right in a way that made no logical sense. He'd never been particularly good with kids, his own species or otherwise. But something about this little princess called to every protective instinct he possessed. As they walked, Zyphira's breathing grew more regular, and the sparkles of light in her exhalations became brighter. Whatever damage had been done to her was healing slowly, just from being somewhere safe. Her small hand found his larger one where it supported her legs, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture of absolute trust. "You smell like metal and electricity," she said drowsily, "but also like kindness. Pip smells like adventures and secrets." Kael glanced at his ferret, who preened at the compliment. "She's a good judge of character, our Pip. If she likes you, you must be special." "Papa says all children of Aethon are special," Zyphira murmured, her voice fading as exhaustion claimed her again. "We carry the star songs that keep the worlds in harmony." Star songs. Kael had heard rumors about the Aethon delegation that had arrived last month, something about trade negotiations and cultural exchange. If this child really was royalty, her disappearance would have massive political implications. But looking at her peaceful face as she drifted off to sleep against his shoulder, all Kael cared about was keeping her safe. Pip chittered softly, her paws gently grooming Zyphira's hair. The ferret had never shown such immediate acceptance of a stranger, but she seemed to understand that this child was special, worthy of protection. Together, the unlikely trio made their way through the colony's quiet streets, bound by circumstance and an inexplicable sense of rightness. Kael's apartment was a cramped efficiency unit in Worker Block 7, barely large enough for one person and a biomodified ferret, let alone a refugee alien princess. But as he carefully settled Zyphira on his narrow bed, the space somehow felt more like home than it had in months. Pip immediately claimed territory next to the child, her warm body providing comfort as Zyphira slept fitfully. The ferret's biomodifications included enhanced empathy sensors, and she seemed attuned to the princess's emotional state in ways that amazed Kael. Every time Zyphira whimpered or shifted restlessly, Pip would nuzzle her face or chirp a soothing melody that somehow calmed the alien child's distress. Kael busied himself preparing what passed for medical supplies in his modest first aid kit, though he had no idea how to treat injured Aethon physiology. The cuts on Zyphira's throat and wings looked precise but superficial, designed to disable rather than kill. Someone had wanted her alive but helpless, which raised disturbing questions about who might target alien royalty on a supposedly neutral colony. "The star songs," Zyphira murmured in her sleep, her small hands glowing faintly with silver light. "They're calling, but I can't answer." As she spoke, the lights in Kael's apartment flickered strangely, and he felt a subtle vibration through the floor, something resonating with her words. He'd worked in recycling and materials processing long enough to recognize harmonic frequencies when he felt them. Zyphira wasn't just talking about songs, she was somehow connected to the colony's infrastructure itself. A soft chime from his doorcom interrupted his thoughts. Kael frowned. He rarely had visitors, especially at this early hour. The security feed showed a tall, elegant figure in flowing robes standing in the corridor. Even through the grainy display, he could see the family resemblance to the child sleeping in his bed. "Mr. Torrhen?" The voice was melodious, tinged with the same otherworldly quality as Zyphira's. "My name is Lyrelai of House Aethon. I believe you have found something precious that belongs to me." Kael glanced at Zyphira, who stirred at the sound of the familiar voice. Pip chittered nervously, positioned protectively between the door and the bed. Whatever political complications were about to walk through his door, he was committed now. He'd promised to keep the princess safe, and he meant it. He opened the door to find himself face to face with the most beautiful being he'd ever encountered. Lyrelai stood nearly as tall as him, her midnight blue skin marked with intricate silver patterns that seemed to shift in the artificial light. Her wings, unlike her daughter's, were magnificent, gossamer membranes that caught the light like stained glass windows. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, the same deep violet as Zyphira's, but filled with a mother's desperate fear and barely contained fury. "You have her," she said, not quite a question. "I can feel her star song resonating from within. Is she—" Her voice broke slightly. "Is she harmed?" "She's sleeping," Kael said, stepping aside to let the alien woman enter. "Someone cut her wings, damaged her throat. She's been through hell, but she's alive." Lyrelai moved past him with fluid grace, her gaze immediately fixing on the small form curled up with Pip on the narrow bed. The sight of her daughter's safe seemed to drain all tension from her posture, and she sank to her knees beside the bed with a sob of relief. "My little star," she whispered, her fingers hovering just above Zyphira's face, as if afraid she might vanish. "I thought I had lost you forever." At her mother's voice, Zyphira's eyes fluttered open. "Mama?" she said sleepily, then with growing excitement. "Mama! The kind man saved me. He promised the bad men wouldn't hurt me anymore." Lyrelai's gaze shifted to Kael, and he saw something he hadn't expected. Gratitude mixed with careful assessment. She was measuring him, trying to determine his motives for helping her daughter. He couldn't blame her. In her position, he'd be suspicious of any human showing unexpected kindness. "You are Kael Torrhen," she said, making it a statement rather than a question. "A recycling technician, no family, no significant political connections." She paused, studying his face. "Why did you help her?" "Because she needed help," Kael said simply. "Because someone hurt a child, and that's not acceptable. I don't care who her parents are or what planet she's from." Something in Lyrelai's expression softened. "The colony security forces searched for 3 days," she said. "Hundreds of officers, advanced scanners, aerial sweeps. They found nothing. Yet a human worker discovers her sleeping on his shoulder like she's been waiting for him specifically." Pip chittered from her position next to Zyphira, and the princess giggled. The first truly happy sound Kael had heard from her. "Pip says she's been protecting me too," Zyphira translated. "She smells like lightning and copper wires, just like you. She says you both understand how machines think." Kael glanced at his ferret, whose biomodifications included enhanced problem-solving capabilities and an almost supernatural ability to navigate complex systems. If Pip had somehow guided Zyphira to him, it suggested the child possessed abilities that complemented his own technical skills. "The star songs," Lyrelai said, following his gaze. "Zyphira's gift allows her to commune with technological systems, to understand their harmonic frequencies and optimize their function. It's why she's so important to our people, and why someone wanted to silence her." "Important how?" Kael asked, settling into his only chair while Lyrelai perched gracefully on the bed's edge. "The Aethon delegation came here to offer a partnership," Lyrelai explained, her hand gently stroking her daughter's hair. "Our star song technology could revolutionize the colony's power grid, make it more efficient and stable, but certain human factions see this as a threat to existing power structures." Zyphira sat up slowly, leaning against her mother's side while keeping one hand on Pip's warm fur. "The bad men said I was a security risk," she said with a child's precise memory for hurtful words. "They said aliens shouldn't meddle with human technology. Then they cut me so my songs would break." Kael felt that familiar protective fury rising again. "Who were they?" "Corporate security contractors," Lyrelai said, her voice carefully neutral. "Employed by parties who profit from the current inefficient systems. With Zyphira's abilities damaged, our entire proposal becomes worthless. We would have no choice but to leave empty-handed." The implications hit Kael like a physical blow. This wasn't just about one injured child. It was about a deliberate sabotage that would affect thousands of colonists who could benefit from improved power systems. The same kind of corporate corruption that had led to the safety violations that killed his brother, packaged in a neat xenophobic wrapper. What would it take to fix the damage? He asked. Lyralei's wings fluttered with surprise. The injuries will heal naturally, given time and proper care, but Zyphira's confidence has been shattered. She's afraid to use her abilities now, afraid of what might happen if she draws attention to herself again. Kael looked at the princess, who was watching him with those remarkable violet eyes. Despite everything she'd been through, he could see the spark of curiosity and intelligence that made her who she was. She wasn't broken, just temporarily dimmed. What if she didn't have to be afraid? He said. What if she had someone to protect her while she practices? Someone who understands machines as well as she does. Pip chittered approvingly, and Zyphira's face lit up with the first real smile Kael had seen from her. The ferret clearly approved of whatever plan was forming in his mind. Lyralei stared at him with an expression of growing amazement. You're offering to help her recover her abilities? A human worker, risking corporate retaliation to assist alien royalty. I'm offering to help a kid who needs help, Kael corrected. Everything else is just details. The colony's main power distribution center was a maze of humming machinery and blinking control panels that would intimidate most people. But for Kael, it was a familiar environment where he'd spent countless hours during his apprenticeship years ago. And for Zyphira, perched on his shoulders with Pip curled around her neck like a living collar, it was apparently the most fascinating place in the known universe. Oh, she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder as they took in the massive fusion reactors and quantum processing units. It's so beautiful, but so sad. Sad, Kael asked, checking his maintenance credentials with the automated security system. Lyralei had used her diplomatic status to arrange this visit, though the colonial governor had been less than enthusiastic about allowing an alien child near critical infrastructure. The harmonics are all wrong, Zyphira explained, her small hand pressing against the nearest control console. Immediately, the display screen shifted, showing efficiency readings that made Kael wince. The machines are working so hard, but they're not happy. They want to sing together, but they don't know how. Pip chittered agreement, her biomodified senses clearly detecting the same harmonic discord that troubled the princess. The ferret had always been sensitive to electrical fields and mechanical stress patterns. It's what made her such a valuable companion for someone in Kael's profession. Show me, Kael said, lifting Zyphira down so she could move freely among the control stations. What followed was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. Zyphira moved from console to console with growing confidence, her hands dancing over interfaces while her voice hummed barely audible melodies. As she worked, the lights throughout the facility began to pulse in rhythm with her songs, and the background hum of machinery shifted from discordant noise to something approaching harmony. The quantum processors want to work in groups of 7, she said, her voice gaining strength with each successful adjustment. And the fusion containment fields need to pulse together like a heartbeat. They've been fighting each other when they should be dancing. Kael watched the efficiency readings climb steadily as Zyphira's star songs synchronized the various systems. What should have taken a team of engineers weeks to optimize, she was accomplishing in minutes through pure intuitive understanding of technological harmonics. "This is impossible," came a voice from behind them. Kael turned to see Chief Engineer Hartwell approaching with a mixture of awe and skepticism on her weathered features. "Those systems haven't run at better than 60% efficiency in 5 years. 73% and climbing," Kael noted, reading the displays over Zyphira's shoulder. The princess beamed with pride, her confidence clearly returning as she demonstrated her abilities in a safe environment. Pip leaped from console to console, her enhanced senses helping to guide Zyphira toward the systems that needed attention most. The ferret had developed an almost telepathic connection with the alien child, serving as both emotional support and technical partner in ways that impressed even Kael. How is this possible? Engineer Hartwell demanded, though her tone held more wonder than accusation. The Aethon possess a natural understanding of harmonic frequencies, Lyrelai explained, entering the facility with diplomatic grace despite the industrial setting. Our children learn to sing with technology the way your children learn to speak. But she's just a kid, Hartwell protested. A kid who's been systematically tortured to prevent exactly this, Kael said coldly, his protective instincts flaring at the implied criticism. Someone wanted to make sure you never saw what she could do. Zyphira paused in her work, looking up at the adults with concern. Did I do something wrong? The machines are happier now, but if you don't want me to— No, sweetheart, Hartwell said quickly, her engineer's pragmatism overriding any political concerns. You did something wonderful. I just need to understand how, so we can make sure it keeps working. The princess smiled and returned to her star songs, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each passing minute. The facility's efficiency climbed past 80%, levels that hadn't been achieved since the original construction. This changes everything, Hartwell murmured to Lyrelai. If we could implement these harmonics colony-wide, we could reduce power consumption by almost 30% while increasing output. The cost savings alone would— She trailed off as the implications hit her. Reduced power costs meant lower living expenses for every colonist. Increased efficiency meant the ability to expand services and infrastructure. And improved system stability meant fewer of the catastrophic failures that had claimed lives like Kael's brother. Now you understand why certain parties wanted to prevent this, Lyrelai said grimly. There are significant profits in inefficiency, especially when the alternative requires cooperation with non-human entities. Kael felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. The corporate contractors who had hurt Zyphira weren't just xenophobic. They were protecting profit margins that depended on the colony's continued technological struggles. But, looking at the princess working confidently with Pip at her side, he saw something they hadn't counted on: the power of simple human decency to disrupt their plans. What do you need from us? He asked Lyrelai directly. She studied his face with those remarkable violet eyes, searching for something she seemed to find. Time, she said finally. Zyphira needs to practice in a safe environment until her confidence fully returns, and we need allies who understand that some things are more important than profit margins. The maintenance staff here are good people, Kael said. They've lost friends to system failures that could have been prevented. They'll support anything that makes the colony safer. As if summoned by his words, other technicians began gathering around the control stations, watching in amazement as readouts showed performance levels they'd never dreamed possible. Word was spreading through the facility's communication systems, carried by workers who recognized a miracle when they saw one. 85% and still climbing, someone called out, and a cheer went up from the assembled workers. Zyphira looked up from her work, her face glowing with joy at the positive reception. Pip says the machines are singing happy songs now, she announced. They like working together instead of fighting. The ferret chittered approvingly from her perch on a quantum processor housing, her biomodified senses confirming the harmonics that only she and Zyphira could fully perceive. Together, the girl and her companion had accomplished what teams of engineers had struggled with for years. But as Kael watched the celebration, he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just painted a very large target on all their backs. The explosion came at 3 a.m, shattering the windows of Kael's apartment and filling the air with the acrid smell of burning electronics. He rolled out of bed instantly, combat reflexes honed by years of industrial accidents kicking in before his mind fully processed the threat. Zyphira screamed, not in fear, but in pain that seemed to resonate through every circuit in the building. The lights flickered wildly as her distress disrupted the local power grid, and Pip's chittering took on an urgent warning tone that made Kael's blood run cold. "They're coming," the princess gasped, her small body curled in a protective ball on the bed. "The bad men found us." "They're angry about the happy machines." Through the broken window, Kael could see armed figures in corporate security armor moving through the worker block courtyard. Their weapons were drawn, and they moved with the systematic precision of a military operation. This wasn't harassment or intimidation. It was an elimination mission. "Lyrelai," Kael called into his comm unit, but got only static in response. Either the explosion had damaged local communications, or someone was jamming signals to prevent calls for help. "Mama's hurt," Zyphira whispered, her voice breaking with despair. "I can't hear her star song anymore." Pip leaped onto Kael's shoulder, her small body tense with alertness as she scanned their surroundings. The ferret's enhanced senses were picking up multiple threat signatures approaching their position, and her chittering translated to a simple message: "Run now, fight later." But where could they run? The worker blocks were isolated from the main colony by design, surrounded by industrial facilities and transport corridors that would offer no cover. And with Zyphira's emotional state disrupting electronics around them, they'd be easy to track by anyone with basic scanning equipment. "Princess," Kael said urgently, lifting her from the bed while Pip scrambled onto his other shoulder. "I need you to be very brave right now. Can you make the machine sleep instead of sing?" Zyphira's tear-stained face looked up at him with confusion. "Sleep? Turn off the power," he clarified. "Make everything dark so the bad men can't see us." Understanding flickered in those violet eyes, followed by determination that was heartbreaking in someone so young. Zyphira closed her eyes and hummed a different kind of melody. Not the joyful harmonies he'd heard in the power station, but something that sounded like a lullaby for tired machines. The lights throughout the worker block died, plunging the entire district into darkness. Emergency power kicked in for essential systems, but the main grid went quiet in response to Zyphira's star song. In the sudden blackness, Kael heard shouts of confusion from the approaching soldiers as their night vision and scanning equipment lost power. "Now we run," he whispered, gathering the princess and ferret close as he made his way toward the maintenance access tunnels that honeycombed the colony's infrastructure. The tunnels were narrow and cramped, designed for automated repair drones rather than human passage. But they connected every major system in the colony, and Kael knew them better than almost anyone after years of maintenance work. If they could reach the central power distribution center, they might have a chance. Zyphira's weight on his back was negligible, but her emotional state continued to affect nearby electronics in ways that worried him. Lights flickered randomly as they passed, and he could hear machinery throughout the colony responding erratically to her distress. If she couldn't regain control soon, her star songs might cause a cascade failure that would black out the entire settlement. "Hey," he said softly as they crawled through a particularly tight junction. "Remember what you told me about the machines wanting to dance together? They're scared now," Zyphira whispered. "Just like me. I don't know how to make them not scared." Pip chittered gently, nuzzling the princess's face with obvious affection. The ferret's calm presence seemed to help stabilize Zyphira's emotional state, and the random electrical disturbances began to fade. "Fear's okay," Kael said, drawing on memories of comforting his younger brother during thunderstorms. "Fear means you care about staying safe, but you can't let it control you. The machines need you to be their conductor, remember? Help them work together instead of panicking alone." As they reached the access point to the power distribution center, Zyphira's breathing began to steady. The chaotic electrical fluctuations smoothed into something approaching normalcy, though Kael could still feel the underlying tension in the colony's infrastructure. "There," Zyphira said with growing confidence, "the machines are listening again. But Mama's still quiet. I think they heard her star song too." The thought of Lyrelai injured or worse sent a spike of unexpected pain through Kael's chest. Over the past few days, the elegant alien diplomat had become more than just Zyphira's mother to him. She'd become someone he cared about deeply, someone whose absence left a hollow ache in his heart. But right now, survival had to take priority over emotions. The power center's maintenance entrance was secured, but Kael's credentials still worked, Apparently, the corporate security team hadn't thought to revoke his access yet. They slipped inside to find the facility operating on emergency power, its normal efficiency levels reduced to baseline functionality. "Can you wake up the big machines?" Kael asked Zyphira. "Make them sing loud enough for everyone in the colony to hear?" The princess considered this, her head tilted in thought. That would make a very big song. Everyone would know where we are. "That's the idea," Kael said grimly. "If the whole colony sees what you can do, if they see how much better their lives could be, it becomes much harder for the bad men to make you disappear." Pip chittered agreement, her bio-modified senses apparently detecting something in the facility's current state that worried her. The ferret positioned herself near the main control console, her small paws dancing over interfaces she'd learned to navigate during their previous visit. Zyphira approached the controls with growing determination. "A big song," she murmured, her hands beginning to glow with silver light. "A song everyone can hear." What happened next was beyond anything Kael had imagined possible. The princess's star song rose from barely audible to a pure, crystalline tone that seemed to resonate through every circuit and conductor in the colony. The facility's lights blazed to life with impossible brightness, and efficiency readings shot past the previous day's records toward theoretical maximums. But it didn't stop there. Throughout Nexus Colony, every electronic device began to pulse in harmony with Zyphira's song. House lights flickered in rhythm. Computers synchronized their processing cycles, and communication systems suddenly operated with crystal clarity despite the supposed jamming. The effect was visible even from space, the entire colony glowing like a beacon against the planet's dark surface, its infrastructure transformed from struggling efficiency to perfect harmony by one small alien child's gift. 94% efficiency colony-wide, Kael read from displays that showed performance levels beyond anything in the technical manuals. And climbing. Through the facility's communication system, now operating at impossible clarity, voices began filtering in from across the colony. Engineers expressing amazement at their suddenly perfect equipment, families marveling at lights that actually worked properly, medical facilities reporting that life support systems were functioning better than ever before. And underneath it all, growing louder by the moment, the sound of angry voices demanding to know why they'd been denied this level of performance for so long. Zyphira swayed slightly, the effort of maintaining such a massive harmonic coordination clearly draining her small reserves of strength. But her smile was radiant as she listened to the colony's technological symphony responding to her guidance. "They're all dancing together," she said with wonder. "Even the sad, broken machines are singing happy songs now." Pip chittered approvingly, her own bio-modified systems resonating in harmony with the princess's star song. Together, the alien child and the enhanced ferret had turned the entire colony into a demonstration of what human Aethon cooperation could accomplish. The sound of approaching footsteps made Kael tense, but the voices that called out weren't hostile. Engineer Hartwell appeared in the doorway, followed by what looked like half the colony's maintenance staff. "We felt it throughout the entire grid," Hartwell said, her voice filled with awe. "Every system, every circuit, all working in perfect harmony. How is this possible?" "This is what they were trying to prevent," Kael said, gesturing to Zyphira as she continued her star song. "This is why they hurt her, why they tried to silence her abilities." "And where are they now?" someone called from the back of the group, probably explaining to very angry colonists why their power bills have been artificially inflated for years. Hartwell said with grim satisfaction. "Hard to maintain corporate security when every comm system in the colony is broadcasting clear evidence of deliberate inefficiency." As if summoned by her words, Lyra Lay appeared in the facility entrance. Her elegant robes were torn and scorched, and one wing showed fresh damage, but her violet eyes blazed with fierce determination. Behind her came a squad of actual colonial defense forces, not corporate contractors, but legitimate military personnel responding to the colony-wide emergency beacon that Zyphira's star song had inadvertently activated. "Mama!" Zyphira cried, her song faltering as she ran into her mother's arms. The moment the princess's concentration broke, the perfect harmony throughout the colony began to fade back toward normal levels. But the demonstration had lasted long enough. Every person on Nexus Colony had experienced what life could be like with properly optimized infrastructure, and the political implications were impossible to ignore. The corporate authorities' private security forces have been detained, the defense squad leader reported. Charges include assault on diplomatic personnel, attempted kidnapping of a minor, and sabotage of colony infrastructure. The governor wants to meet with all parties involved. Kael felt a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying finally lift from his shoulders. They were safe, all of them, and the corporate conspiracy that had threatened Zyphira was collapsing under its own exposed corruption. But as he watched mother and daughter reunite, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of much larger changes ahead. The colony council chambers had never hosted a ceremony quite like this one. Representatives from every district packed the galleries, while the main floor featured an unprecedented mix of human officials and Aethon diplomats. At the center of it all, a small princess in formal robes stood hand in hand with a gruff recycling worker who looked distinctly uncomfortable in his borrowed dress uniform. "By the authority vested in me by the colonial charter," Governor Chen announced, "I hereby grant Kael Torrhen full citizenship in the Nexus Colony, autonomous region, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereto." The crowd erupted in applause, but Kael barely heard it. His attention was focused on Zyphira, who beamed up at him with pride that made his chest tight with unfamiliar emotions. Over the past week, as the political fallout from the corporate conspiracy continued to unfold, she'd become the center of his universe in ways he'd never expected. Furthermore, the governor continued, in recognition of his extraordinary service to the colony and protection of our diplomatic guests, Mr. Torrhen is appointed to the newly created position of Human Aethon Technological Liaison, with full authority to oversee infrastructure integration projects. That got Kael's attention. He glanced at Lyrelai, who stood gracefully nearby in formal diplomatic attire. Her smile held warmth that went far beyond professional courtesy, and he felt his heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with political ceremonies. "And now," the governor said, turning to the Aethon section of the platform, "I yield the floor to Her Grace Lyrelai, Speaker for House Aethon and the Crystal Throne of Luminous Prime." Lyrelai moved forward with fluid grace, her wings catching the chamber's lights like stained glass windows. When she spoke, her voice carried the ceremonial cadences of her people, but her words were meant for the mixed audience of humans and aliens gathered before her. "By the ancient laws of our people," she began, "one who saves the life of an Aethon child becomes part of that child's family, with all the bonds and obligations such kinship entails. Kael Torrhen has not merely saved my daughter's life. He has restored her gift, protected her from those who would do harm, and demonstrated the courage and compassion that define true nobility." She paused, her violet eyes meeting Kael's with an intensity that made the crowded chamber feel suddenly intimate. "Therefore, by right of blood debt and the sacred laws of our ancestors, I formally adopt Kael Torrhen as a son of House Aethon, with all titles, honors, and responsibilities that such adoption entails." The chamber fell silent as the full implications sank in. Kael stared at Lyrelai in shock, understanding that she'd just offered him something beyond his wildest dreams. Not just a place in her family, but a bridge between two species that could reshape both their futures. He started, then looked down at Zyphira, who was practically bouncing with excitement. "Say yes," she whispered urgently. "Please say yes. Pip wants you to say yes too." The ferret in question chittered approvingly from her perch on the princess's shoulder, her biomodified senses clearly detecting the emotional resonance of the moment. Over the past week, Pip had become as much Zyphira's companion as Kael's, forming bonds that transcended species barriers. "I accept," Kael said, his voice rougher than he intended. "With honor and gratitude." Lyrelai's smile could have powered the colony's fusion reactors. She stepped forward, her hands gentle as she placed them on his shoulders in the traditional Aethon gesture of family welcome. "Then let it be witnessed by all present," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Kael Torrhen is now Kael of House Aethon, first human son, protector of the Star Songs, and guardian of the Princess Zyphira." The titles washed over him like music, formal and weighty, but also warm with genuine acceptance. As Lyrelai's hands rested on his shoulders, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his brother's death, the sense of belonging somewhere, of being part of something larger than himself. "But that's not all," Zyphira announced with the theatrical flair of a child who'd been keeping a secret. "Mama has more surprises." Lyrelai laughed, the sound like silver bells in a gentle breeze. "Indeed I do. The Aethon Council has also authorized me to offer a formal alliance between our peoples, a technological and cultural exchange that could benefit both our species for generations to come." Governor Chen leaned forward with obvious interest. "What would such an alliance entail?" "Starsong technology integrated into your colony's infrastructure, supervised by trained Aethon technicians working alongside human engineers," Lyrelai explained. "Cultural exchange programs, joint scientific research, and mutual defense agreements. In short, the kind of partnership that was always intended, but which certain parties sought to prevent." Kael felt pieces clicking into place. That's why they targeted Zyphira specifically. Not just to sabotage the negotiations, but to prevent anyone from seeing what cooperation could accomplish. "Precisely," Lyrelai confirmed. "But their actions have had the opposite effect. The entire colony has now experienced optimized infrastructure firsthand. The political pressure for formal alliance is overwhelming. In the galleries, colonists were already voicing their approval. The past week had brought tangible improvements to everyone's daily life. More reliable power, better communication systems, and the promise of reduced living costs that came with increased efficiency. The corporate interests that had opposed Aethon cooperation found themselves facing a populace that had seen the benefits and wouldn't accept anything less. "There's one more thing," Lyrelai said, her voice dropping to a more personal tone as she addressed Kael directly. "The position of human Aethon technological liaison comes with certain diplomatic privileges." She paused, and Kael saw something in her eyes that made his pulse quicken. Not the formal courtesy of political necessity, but something warmer and more personal. "Including the right to negotiate additional family bonds," she continued, "should both parties find such arrangements desirable." The chamber erupted in cheers and applause, but Kael heard none of it. He was lost in Lyrelai's violet eyes, seeing there an invitation to something that went far beyond political alliance or even adoption bonds. She was offering him not just a place in her family, but a chance at something he'd never dared hope for. Genuine love and partnership with someone who understood both his strengths and his scars. He started, then looked down at Zyphira, who was grinning with the satisfaction of a successful matchmaker. "Mama's been sad for a very long time," the princess said matter-of-factly. "But she sings happy songs now when she talks about you, and her wings flutter in special ways that mean she wants to build a nest." "Zyphira," Lyrelai protested, her midnight blue skin somehow managing to show a blush. "It's true," the princess insisted, "and Pip agrees. She says you smell like you want to be part of our flock." The ferret chittered confirmation, her bio-modified senses apparently capable of detecting pheromones and emotional states that escaped human perception. Kael made a mental note to have a serious talk with his companion about privacy and appropriate commentary. But looking at Lyrelai, really looking at her, not as an alien diplomat or even as Zyphira's mother, but as a woman who'd shown him kindness, trust, and something that might be love. He realized his answer had been obvious from the moment he'd chosen to protect her daughter. "Yes," he said simply, "to all of it." The adoption, the alliance, the additional family bonds. This time, Lorelai's smile outshone even the colony's optimized lighting systems. She stepped closer, her wings spread in a gesture that somehow managed to include both him and Zyphira in a protective embrace. "Then let it be recorded in both human and Aethon law," she said formally, but her eyes held only warmth. "The alliance between our peoples begins with the alliance between our hearts." The ceremony that followed was a blur of formal declarations, signing ceremonies, and carefully orchestrated media coverage. But through it all, Kael remained focused on the small family unit that had somehow formed around him. The brilliant princess who'd trusted him with her safety, the remarkable woman who'd trusted him with her heart, and the biomodified ferret who'd apparently appointed herself guardian of them all. As they left the council chambers, together, Zyphira skipping between them while Pip rode on Kael's shoulder, he marveled at how completely his life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, he'd been a lonely worker with nothing to live for but the next shift. Now he was part of something extraordinary. A family that bridged species and worlds, bound together by love, trust, and the kind of hope he thought was lost forever. "So what happens now?" he asked Lorelai as they walked through the colony's main plaza. "Now we build something new," she said, her hand finding his with natural ease. "A partnership between our peoples, a family that spans the stars, and a future where children like Zyphira can grow up safe and loved." "And better machines," Zyphira added solemnly. "Don't forget the better machines. They're very important too." Pip chittered agreement, and Kael laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since his brother's death. Looking around at the colony's improved lighting, listening to the harmonious hum of optimized systems, and feeling the warmth of the family that had chosen him just as much as he'd chosen them, he realized that sometimes the most extraordinary changes began with the simplest acts of kindness. The lost little princess had found her way home, sleeping safely on a human's shoulder. And in saving her, Kael had found something he'd never expected, a home of his own, built not of metal and circuits, but of love, trust, and the infinite possibilities that opened when different species chose to work together rather than apart. 3 months later, as he watched Zyphira conduct a colony-wide symphony of perfectly synchronized technology while Pip curled contentedly in Lorelai's lap, Kael reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them all together. The corporate conspiracy that had nearly destroyed them had inadvertently created something beautiful, a new model for human-alien cooperation that was already spreading to other worlds. The colony's efficiency ratings had stabilized at unprecedented levels, with cost savings that allowed for expanded services and infrastructure improvements that benefited every resident. The Aethon Cultural Exchange Program had brought artists, scientists, and technicians who were transforming not just the colony's capabilities, but its entire worldview. And at the center of it all, a small family that had formed around an act of simple kindness. Proof that the most profound changes often began with one person deciding to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. "Papa Kael," Zyphira said, using the title that never failed to make his heart swell with pride. "The machines want to learn a new song. Will you help me teach them?" "Always," he replied, lifting her onto his shoulders while Pip scrambled up to her favorite perch. "We'll teach them together." As the 3 of them, 4, counting Lorelai, made their way toward the colony's expanded technological center, Kael felt the profound satisfaction of a man who had found his purpose. The lost little princess had been found, the colony had been transformed, and 2 species had learned to dance together in harmony. Sometimes, he reflected, the best solutions really were the simplest ones: kindness, courage, and the willingness to protect those who needed protection. Everything else was just technology, and technology, as Zyphira had taught them all, worked best when it served love rather than profit. The star songs of the Aethon rang through the colony's optimized systems, and for the first time in years, everything was exactly as it should be.